What's up, and welcome to The Standpoint, a podcast dedicated to all things God, sports, and world issues that I feel is relevant. On today's debut episode, we will be discussing the following things: is God real? My review of national championship, and my opinion on January 6 pardons. Now, with all that being said, let's go, baby. Let's get it. Jesus Christ. Without him, I am nothing. Anybody who may be familiar with the guy I serve, I want you to know that he loves you so dearly, and wants you to be saved. John 3:16, and it reads, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Now, let's get into our topics, shall we? Now, the first topic is God real? Now, ever since the inception of time, this idea of is there God or is there not has been steadfast for mankind. Now, most sources were claimed or recognized for the vigor of this conversation came from the idea of philosophy, which originated in 6th century BC. Now, the early thinkers of this time sought to understand their human existence, or in other words, their relation to the universe. Now, we talk about these early thinkers, such as you have Socrates, you have Plato, Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton. They all held the belief in a higher power, if you will. Some of them practiced something called the Pythagorean tradition, which we call the Pythagorean theorem, but they called it or labeled it the Pythagorean tradition, which is basically that all the Earth's qualms or all the things about the Earth can be solved mathematically through reason. So older thinkers during that time didn't necessarily believe in God, but they were kind of a small majority because many people during that time held the belief in a higher power. One example of somebody who didn't necessarily is a philosopher by the name of Epicurus. His argument would be that if there's a God, then why do bad things happen? That's important. You'll see it in the end. But yeah, that was his idea. So he didn't necessarily believe in a God. Now, I'm of the belief that if you look at simply the tutelage of history, the idea or the belief of a God has been over the overwhelming majority. A lot of examples that come to mind, such as the Egyptians. As one key point to point out, they thought that their pharaohs were gods. So I think it's interesting, along with other things that represented nature or animals. So they had a belief in the overwhelming gods or goddesses, if you will. We talk about the Mesopotamians, and they were having some of the Tigris River and the Euphrates River in West Asia, and they held a belief in multiple gods or deities. It's called polytheism, with the belief in multiple gods or deities. So you see those two striking examples, those blatant examples of the idea of a higher power, or you will. And further, you still see the existence or the idea of a higher power or deity. I have it right here. Now, these three examples I'm about to tell you, there are, albeit they're not as positive, they're actually kind of negative, but they do show our key examples when it comes to the idea of a higher power of God. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So the European settlers, they held the belief, not European settlers, my bad. European settlers and conquistadors, they had the belief in a higher power and God. If you looked at history, we always talk about God, glory, and gold, but they use the idea of God as a means to why they, take over native land. And we all know we had greed, but the God was the overwhelming theme of it. And we also know, unfortunately, and sadly throughout history, that they tried to force Native Americans to assimilate, and if they didn't assimilate, they would kill them. So that's a negative example, but it just shows you an example of that idea of a higher power, a deity view. I can go back to slavery. That's another example, albeit very negative, I should know. But again, the idea of a higher power and justification of slavery through religion, it was used, vehemently used. And same thing with the Woods-Salem trials, the idea of a higher power, and if this person strikes out or does this, then something bad can happen, so we're going to kill this person. So those examples are negative, but you see the advent of the belief in a higher power or God, if you will. So throughout history, you've seen that vehemently, and I just showed you examples throughout centuries, that belief in a higher power, if you will. So I think that's kind of interesting. Now, more centuries would pass, and getting back to the 1800s, and the advent of modernism kind of changed the philosophy or the idea of a higher power with notable scientists that we affirm or adhere to. And I think it's kind of interesting, starting with Spinoza, and that was the 17th century. But he identified God more so nature, but he didn't see him as an overall creator or this godly figure that ruled the world. He didn't see it as that, or created the world. He didn't see it as that at all. And now we get to the 1800s, you see an influx of scientists who vehemently did not believe in the existence of God. That scientists nowadays praise. We talk about Charles Darwin, most recognized for the evolutionary theory. He did not believe in the existence of a God at all. Edwin Hubble, most recognized for the Big Bang Theory. He did not believe in a God at all. Edwin Teller, most recognized for, he's the father of the H-bomb. He did not believe in God at all. And we talk about James Watson, the DNA co-discoverer. So he did not believe in the existence of a God. So I think it's just striking to see the contrast between the scientists, or the Enlightenment thinkers I would think of, further in Greek Roman times and how they held the belief in the higher power of God, if you will, versus the 1800s and when modernism, when scientists start to, create their own whims about it and they necessarily don't believe in a God. So I think that's a very interesting contrast. So now you've heard a little history, and now it's time for me to give you my opinion. So, yes, I do vehemently believe in the existence of a higher power, God, if you will, and here are my 3 reasons why. The first one, law of energy. In science, we're often taught the first law of thermodynamics, that energy can be neither created nor destroyed. Now, they often use soliloquy that scientists rationalize for the existence of Earth is that the Big Bang Theory was to occur or happen. Now, if you don't know, you probably do know, but if you don't know, the Big Bang Theory, or the rationale behind that, is that an explosion, if you will, caused the creation or the procreation of Earth and all the beings within it. Just looking at the first law of thermodynamics, it vehemently disqualifies the claim. Again, I go back to the idea of what the first law of thermodynamics is. Energy can be neither created nor destroyed. It disqualifies the Big Bang Theory. It just does. So I think it's something that we need to think about and rationalize with ourselves. How can something come from nothing? It can't. And Big Bang Theories, it's just that. So then we need to look at that. Secondly, I think one can easily look, and I have it right here for you guys, so you guys can, I'm going to read it to you. I think secondly is nature in the human body. I think one cannot vehemently deny God's existence from just looking at nature and the beauties of it in our bodies and the beauties of our bodies and how we're procreated. The idea of its design. And I have it right here. The formation of Earth was just so perfect. If we were getting farther or closer to the sun, we'd all be dead. Look at statistics. Look at it. It's a fact. Look at it. We can talk about the perfect tilt of the Earth, 23.5, and how it allows for moderate seasons and prevents temperature extremes. Imagine if it wasn't like that, where we would be. We can talk about natural cycles that sustain the Earth, the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, all these different cycles that help sustain and maintain the Earth and its beauties. Without those things, we would have nothing. Who created that? Who formed that? Who controls that? Because we don't. Exactly. Oh my gosh. And this is something that I used to always say to people, look at how we breathe. We breathe out carbon dioxide, and trees are able to receive that, and then they use the carbon dioxide and give it back oxygen, which allows us to breathe and sustain our life in our own bodies and beings. How does that work? There's instruction, there's a design behind it, and I just think we need to be able to think about that and look at it a little deeper. I can go into gravity, which allows for us to stay grounded. Any higher or lower can have dangerous ramifications for us as human beings. The neural systems within our body that allow for us to function properly. Nobody's telling us to do that. Our heart beats without us even thinking. It does that. The millions of neurons in our body that allow for us to function and think. Think about that. Think about that. We don't control that. You can cut your hair and it automatically grows without us thinking. You get a cut, the body sends cells to help block the clot, and then it sends different cells to rebuild and repair the damage. Think about that. When you get sick, the body sends natural red and white blood cells to help defend the infected area, or to kill the immunity, kill the disease. Think about that. Their body naturally does that without even thinking. Think about that. So I think it's just in simply looking. Sometimes I think we got to be able to look at the design of the Earth and the design of us. And when I think you look at those things and study it intently, one cannot deny that we are a creation. There is some creator behind the scenes. And I think the biggest thing is just realizing it's not us. It's not us. Now, the last thing I'll say before I leave it, this argument, just look at nature, Mother Nature. Mother Nature. We cannot control hurricanes or natural disasters that happen. So who formed those? Who made those? We didn't. So I think you just gotta be able to look at that. It's very interesting, and it brings up the idea of a higher power being, if you will. And the third thing people like to do, and this is the argument that I like to disavow all the time, but people always say, and kind of what not Spinoza was saying, but Epicurus' argument was, if there's a God, then why do bad things happen? I simply believe that the idea of, the argument of, if there's God, then why do bad things happen? There's not God because bad things happen. It's just a cop-out. When you look at the Bible in its entirety, God has certain laws and rules and regulations for his people. as us as human beings. First of all, he's a creator, so we can't outsmart him. But what man does in the Bible, and you see it all the time, and you see it nowadays, is we think we know better than God. So we don't follow his commandments, the things he tells us to be able to do or wants us to do. And when bad things happen, we want to blame God and ask why. Guys, I suggest to you that 80-90% of the things that happen are bad things that happen within our life as a result of us not following God's commandments and listening to what he allows us to be able to do or wants us to do or desires for us to do. That's what comes about. Now, granted, there are certain things, cancer, those birth defects, things of that nature. I understand those. So, but 80 or 90% of those things, I believe, that happen to us are a result of us self-inflicting our own will, desiring what we want to do, our own lust, compared to what it talks about following God. I have 3 examples: sex, drugs, and substances. In the mouth, the tongue, or the tongue, if you will. Talk about sex. God tells us vehemently in the Bible to save sex for marriage. But what do? We think we know better. So, sex out of wedlock, what does that create? It creates unwed births, creates babies, orphans, ungodly lust, all those different types of things that form diseases, that form it from the idea of thinking we know better than God. Substances and drugs. We talk about the numerous diseases and addictions that result from that thing. But again, the death that result. Drunk driving is one of the leading causes of death, but we decide we know better. We know better than God, the man who created us. And thirdly, the tongue. The Bible says no man can tame. And again, I'm going to ask you, how many words do you think were created from the tongue? Not being able to control the tongue. A dang lot. A lot. So, again, the idea that, if there's a God, then why bad things happen, I think that's such a cop-out, because the idea is God gives us free will to decide whether we're going to follow him or not. And I guarantee you that 80 or 90% of the bad things that happen to us are a result of us not listening to the Creator. Remember, my dad used to always say, God made you. You can outsmart him. So why do we think we can? We can't. So it's looking like that. Let's be better humans. Let's be better guys. Let's be better. Now, on the list is my review of the national championship. So it says that Ohio State Buckeyes will defeat the Fighting Irish to claim their first national championship in a decade, 34-23. So guys, originally coming to the game, everybody thought that the Ohio State Buckeyes were going to win. Nobody discounted that. They were the overwhelming favorites. But so, especially both sides of the ball, when you look at it, I have it right here, you look at it, they were the hottest team. After that loss in Michigan, they were the hottest team, scoring at 111 points. The defense playing stout, blowing Oregon out the gates. So we all saw that. Texas too, and the Lord have mercy, Tennessee. So we saw the stoutness. So they had the advantage coming into the game. That was just a given. Now the game would start off, and with the Irish, and they would end up going on 18 play, 75, almost 10-minute drive with Leonard Riley running the ball in 9 carries, 34 yards, and would score on that. So, Ohio State, Notre Dame kind of set the tone, or we thought, of what the game could be. Could they stand with Ohio State in that high-powered offense? And they would set the tone, so we would think that. Until Ohio State would do what Ohio State did. And Ohio State would only go scoring 3 straight drives. And I think the thing is, and I be honest with you guys, I kind of thought this too. I was telling everybody, the beginning of the game, I think what was going to get Notre Dame in trouble is their inability, their one-dimensionalness. They're one-dimensional. They run the ball. And they play horribly behind. They cannot pass the ball as consistent enough. Ohio State, what makes them so lethal and potent is the two-dimensional capability. If you start down the run, they can obviously pass the ball. We see Jeremiah Smith. We see Abuka. The tight end they have the plethora of talent. Same thing if you were to shut down the passing game. Trayvon Henderson. And we talked about Judkins. Oh my gosh, I believe he had 3 touchdowns. So you saw that. And you saw them. So it's not that necessarily it was 21-7 at the half. It's not necessarily that I believe Notre Dame's defense was horrible. It's just a plethora of talent that OSU has. They had talent. And it's almost, and another thing, they couldn't get pressure to Howard. And so he was able to pick them apart. And they were just so surgical down the field. It wasn't like Notre Dame was doing bad. It's just the plethora of talent. You can't stop it. So like I just said before, going into the half, it was 21-7. And then Ohio State with the ball back. I believe it was Judkins, who run 73 yards, and then him scoring, and then it'd be 28-7. And all hopefully lost for Notre Dame, for us. But as we know, Notre Dame wouldn't give up. That's how Marcus Freeman coaches the guys. Before, I believe in third quarter, midway through the third quarter, they would score. Notre Dame would score on a pass. They would get a 2-point conversion, and then going to the fourth, almost clock down, they would score again and tie it, and make the game very interesting. With 2 minutes, I believe 40-something seconds left, defense would get Ohio State to 30-11. And the biggest question came of the night: would Ohio State barbecue or mildew? Would they convert or give Notre Dame the ball back, tie the game, and send it to overtime. And as with fans, we all saw the result. 3rd and 11, that freshman, 6'3", 215, 4.3 speed, Jeremiah Smith, baby. Jeremiah Smith on a go route, man to man. Go out, beat your man, and he sure did. So the Ohio State Buckeyes were going to win the game 34-23. And for me, I have 3 initial reactions, or observations. I think the first thing is I think it's kind of interesting, the contrast. You know, the beginning of the 14 playoff, which I believe was established in 2014, Ohio State was the first team to win that. In 2014, remember they had Ezekiel Elliott. Remember the game before that, I believe it was the Sugar Bowl, they beat Alabama. Ezekiel Elliott run all over the place against Nick Saban's defense, which, you know, one of the first times that's ever happened in one of those big high-power games. And secondly, they ended up being Oregon, which, remember, Marcus Mariota was the Heisman quarterback that time, and they beat them. So that was Urban Meyer's first national championship, first and only national championship at Ohio State, but they win that. And then 10 years later, to be able to, in this new 12-team format, to be able to come out on top of the victors, I think that's a very interesting contrast. So I think that's the first segment I took away. Second segment I took away, I'm so happy for the coach of Ohio State, Ryan Day, to finally get the monkey off his back. You know, the hate and vitriol he's been getting is ridiculous and it's horrid, you know, but going to or coaching a high premier program like that invokes that, you know. But to hear about the, you know, Kirby, Kirk saying on the Pat McAfee show that, you know, he had relationships with Ryan Day, his intimate relationship, he knows him, and the idea that he was getting death threats and his kids were getting death threats and his wife was being threatened and all that stuff, and he had to send guards out of on his house, that's crazy. That's the vitriol and these fans held because he couldn't beat Michigan for 4 straight years in a row, you know. But they won those championships, so hopefully that subsides a little bit. But I'm just happy for him. You know, seems like a good guy, good coach. You know, so just to see him finally win, he's been there for a very long time, and all the pressure that comes with the Ohio State Buckeyes job. You know, so just for him to be able to win, I thought that was so impressive. So I'm so happy for him. I really am. That's great for him and his family. So, you know, God bless him, and just congratulations. Coach, it's well deserved. I think the last thing I want to take away from that, and I thought this was the most remarkable, because remember, you know, Jesus comes first before everything, is that the ability for the Ohio State player is to give thanks and glory to God after the victory. You know, typically when you win something of that magnitude, God isn't necessarily the first thing in your mind. You know, so for them people to be able to redirect, to keep going back to Christ, and really throughout the whole entire season they did this, even throughout the playoffs, but to be able to get to the highest point, the precipice, you know, of glory and to win, and then be able to give God glory and interviews. I thought that was so remarkable, and not just something good. And I think they don't understand the impact you make from that. You know, athletes have a very big platform, so I think their ability, especially their quarterback, to be able to do that. Henderson does it all the time too. It's, you know, just is really remarkable, and it, you know, it gives people a chance to be able to potentially get to know God, and, you know, or why are you the way you are. You know, and God tells us by the word. So for them to be able to do that, I thought it was so remarkable and so impressive, and just God bless them. And I thought it was even more incredible with Notre Dame, and they did the same thing after the, you know, and they lost, and they still gave all glory and thanks to God even through their loss. So I just thought that was really good on those both ends. And so, yeah. Well, congratulations to Ohio State, Marcus Freeman, your 3rd year. I know you didn't get, you know, the championship, but I just want to say, you're a remarkable coach, and what you've been able to do for that program in 3 years is so daggone impressive. And, you know, I know you're going to be incredible and keep going. So, Coach, just keep going, keep fighting, keep being you, and just look at how far you've come, and look how far God's allowed you to be. So, congratulations, and keep going. But, yeah. Now, my third and final point, or topic I want to bring up, is the pardoning of January 6 rioters. Whew. Let me read it. It says, in the moments after taking office for a second term, Trump would get right to work, signing a series of executive orders to uphold promises he made during his campaign. In an appeal to his base, the 47th president would grant a full pardon to 1,500 January 6 rioters, calling them hostages. The decision has led to a plethora of controversy. Now, this is just a review for the January 6th of what actually happened, the ramifications and damages that took place. Just for people who may not remember, I want to be able to jog your memory before I get into my spill. On January 6, 2021, American history will forever be stained. Hundreds of protesters, unsatisfied with the results of the 2020 election, will seek to nullify the results by overthrowing the Capitol. The chaotic aftermath would lead to various property damages, injuries to over 150 officers, and the death of 4 by suicide. Of the 1,500 pardoned, 1,000 pleaded guilty, and 260 were convicted. Most notable figures released from prison were white nationalist Proud Boys leader Enrique Taro, Oath Keeper, far-right anti-militia government militia leader Stuart Rhodes and founder of Silk Road, an extensive drug web marketplace, Ross Ulbricht. The START decision has been been met favorably. 6 out of 10 Americans oppose it, according to a recent poll. Now, I vehemently disagree with this pardoning. First and foremost, I think the pardon over 1,500 people who rioted the Capitol because they didn't get what they wanted during the election is a slap in the face to democracy that we so happen to stand on. Those individuals are criminals and deserve to be prosecuted for the wrongdoing. They assaulted police officers, destroyed property, and called for the deaths of the politicians who serve our very country. I think it's very funny and hypocritical for someone who claims that all immigrants are criminals or rapists, and which, if you look at the stats, that's a false claim, that he pardoned 1,500 people who were actually criminals. I think that's very damaging and very hypocritical, sir. Very bad. Second point about that, if you will, I am so sorry and I feel so bad for the families of the police officers that died. It's a slap in the face to those families, for the people who killed their babies, who killed their loved ones, to get off scot-free. That's a slap in the face to them. A slap in the face to them. It's horrid. I can't imagine what they're going through, what they're feeling from that. It's sad. And I don't know. What does it make America look like? And to the country, and the world as a country, and then what does it make us look like to the world? That you can do everything and get away with it? You can riot the Capitol, you can treason, and you get away with it scot-free. So, and not to forget, Trump called them hostages. Not rioters, he called them hostages. Hostages. Really? Really? I also think it's key to point out that the men who were freed as a result of this pardon, 3 guys I kind of mentioned earlier, but I just want to be able to repeat those names so you guys get the idea. A white nationalist leader, Enrique Toro, was released. Oath Keeper leader Stuart Rhodes was released, and Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht was released. Look at those guys when you get a chance. Not the best of people. Not the best of people. Not the best of people. And the last thing I'll say about this, and this is horrible, but what the pardoning. But I think the last thing I'll say is that I've heard the rebuttal that because Biden released his son, that Trump was justified in releasing 1,500 people. Can I tell you something? The two aren't the same. Not the same at all. It's like comparing apples and oranges. One person versus 1,500 people. Hunter Biden, well, he may have deserved not to be pardoned for what he did, and maybe it wasn't wise for Joe Biden to pardon his son, even in going back on what he said he wasn't going to. Hunter didn't storm the Capitol. Hunter didn't try to destruct or get rid of democracy. He didn't assault police officers. He didn't kill 5 officers, to be exact. And he didn't call for the deaths of Nancy Pelosi or Mike Pence. The 1,500 did. America, we must be better. Come on now, we must be better. If you made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this standpoint. And now just a little recap of what we went over. First, we talked about, the existence of God. We answered that question. The second thing we talked about is my review of the national championship. And lastly, I gave you my opinion on the January 6th pardons. Now, I just want to say thank you again. Be sure to share, subscribe, and then you can follow us on Instagram at the_standpoint23. Now again, thank you, and as always, from the bottom of my heart, God bless. Good night.